but he would talk about how he would share the gospel and share the story of Jesus Christ, and they would say, we know this story. They just use a different name for Jesus, but like the exact same gospel story. And I mean, to me, that I'm like, that's Romans 12. This is Ask Dr. E, where Dr. Michael Easley answers your biblical or theological questions in 10 minutes or less. Today's question is our last question from, I think, a 10-week series where we have been recording in a senior high Bible class. And so our question is...
So there are people in the world in remote locations that have no access to God's word in their language. What happens to them when they die?
You know, this is probably one of the top 10 questions historically. You know, what about people who've never heard? What about people that don't have a written language? What about people that, you know, never knew about Jesus? Let me jump ahead and then go backwards. We're closer now at this time than any time in America's history and the Brits' history of having every language translated. SIL Project, New Tribes, these folks are using technology. AI will come into it very shortly. What used to take, you know, easily 18 years to do a New Testament, then with 7 years, now it's like 3.5 years. The speed with which known languages are being translated is phenomenal. So in this day and age, this won't be as big a concern. Let's go back in time for those that never knew about Christ. Number one, all of us deserve to go to hell. Mankind is born on a freight train headed to hell. There are none righteous, no, not one. Number two, God is holy and just. He's not going to change his character. He is who he is. He created us. He's a holy God. He's a just God. He's not a God of favoritism. We have this term called ontological, the ontological argument. And it's not bulletproof, but it's very helpful. Psalm 19, as well as Romans 1, talk about this, that the heavens declare the glory of God in the Psalms. And in Romans 1:18, it says there's enough evidence when you look around that there has to be a creator. Sometimes you hear the word intelligent design. So if you look at a leaf under a microscope and you go, there's no way this happened just by random chance. You look at a human cell, you look at a MRI image of a spine or a brain, you go, there's no way this happened. There's got to be some intelligence behind. The stories are legendary when the planes went into the Auca Indians and they make a straw plane and worship the plane. Other tribes will riddle a plane for arrows because they think it's some invading god coming into their land. So there's a natural propensity for all man, whether tribal or educated, to look to something beyond themselves and worship it. And that's a very haphazard way of talking about the ontological argument. But this is what the psalmist is saying. This is what Paul is saying. Now, add to this, God is not capricious. God didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to create mankind and send them all to hell. God created mankind to have a relationship with them, to enjoy him forever, to be forgiven of sin and live with him in his kingdom forever and ever. He had to make a way for that, and the provision was Jesus Christ. That's the only provision. There's no plan B. And our minds can run to the contingencies, what about, and naturally so. Norman Geisler, who was a great apologist, brilliant man, made the comment once, and I thought it was well chosen. God will never send someone to hell who did not have an opportunity to believe in him. God will never send someone to hell who did not have an opportunity to believe in him. That's a loaded sentence, and you have to take it carefully, but I like the direction of where Dr. Geisler was going. And I think it's interesting. To me, when I hear that question, and I don't mean this self-deprecating or like poor pitiful me, when I hear that question, the thing I think of is, why do I get to go to heaven? Why did I get to hear? Why did he reveal the gospel to me when other people maybe didn't have the opportunities you and I have? And that's where my mind runs, as opposed to, what about all those people out there that never heard? It's, wow, why would he choose me when I know I deserve to go to hell? And then the ancillary is, do I care about those who've yet heard? Do I care enough to, help those who should take the gospel? My friends Larry and Linda Jones spent their whole life in the bush, their whole life translating a language that was unwritten. And the number of people come to Christ through their labors. Many here, folks in town who've done this as well. And your teacher has done this as well. They spent their life in a different country that doesn't speak a language that is readily available. And that's, to me, the next part of the discussion. What about those that have never heard? Well, what are we doing about it to help them hear?
I know we're not supposed to let our experiences teach us theology
heard that once before, yeah.
anecdotes teach us theology, but I have a friend whose dad was a missionary and he would go to places that, I mean, no outside person had ever come to the village. They'd never seen a white man. This was his whole life. He's with the Lord now. But he would talk about how he would share the gospel and share the story of Jesus Christ. And they would say, we know this story. They just use a different name for Jesus, but like the exact same gospel story. And I mean, to me, that I'm like, that's Romans 12. That's Psalm, whatever Psalm that was. Like this is like somehow the Lord reveals himself to those that we think, well, they can't be reached because they don't have the Bible. Like, no, the Lord can reach whoever he wants to reach.
Amen.
All right. Well, if you've got a question for Dr. E, call us, text us, email us. The info is in your show notes. Ask Dr. E is produced by me, Hannah Seymour, mixed and mastered by Sonomorphic, and music composed by Jason Germain.